What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 228 of the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. I am your host, Elizabeth D'Alto. This is Sunday sermon number 24, and this is our final episode under the name Untame the Wild Soul podcast. In tomorrow's episode number 229, I'll be revealing the new name for the show, so definitely tune in for that. Back to today, if you're new to the podcast, or this is your first Sunday sermon, these are shorter solo episodes, just 10 to 20 minutes, where I do things like oracle readings or share my favorite prayers, poems, or excerpts from things that I'm reading. They're like wild and untamed gospel, heart ponderings, and delicious morsels of wisdom to spark your own truth, power, and love from my wild soul to yours. In these episodes, I explore creative and inspiring ideas, thoughts, and ruminations for you to be nourished and fed by going into your week. I share a lot of my own personal experiences, and as a person who was raised with religion, another inspiration to create these sermons was to provide a Sunday ritual that's more aligned with my current and ever-evolving spirituality and worldviews. That said, all belief systems are welcomed here on the show. My truth, ponderings, experiences, and curiosities are simply that, my own. So no matter what your faith is, may you get exactly what you need from listening to this, and may you remember always that everything you've ever needed has always been inside of you. You are made from love, you are love, and you are loved. When I sat down to record this, it was the Sunday night the week before it goes live. And I realized as I began that it was the final episode under the original name of the podcast, Untame the Wild Soul. When I realized that, I had to stop recording and allow myself something I hadn't fully acknowledged or felt, amidst all of my excitement for transitioning to the new name, which again, I'll be revealing tomorrow and not a moment sooner. What I was feeling was grief. It hit me like a ton of bricks. And this is something that happens to me sometimes because I'm not risk or change averse. So once I get excited and clear about a new direction, I am all in, sometimes blazing the new trail while still standing with one foot in the old one. It's a function of passion and great enthusiasm, and sometimes it creates situations for delayed reactions later. My mom would tell you, I've always been like that. So there I was, crying at my computer, bittersweet tears of both immense gratitude and also sadness for what has been and what will no longer be, and what's simply evolving. This podcast has changed my life in so many ways, and I know it's changed many of your lives too. So I texted Natanya, my right hand, who's helped me produce the show from day one, and then I went over to Facebook to reflect. Here's what I wrote. Wasn't expecting that. Just sat down to record next week's Sunday Sermon podcast episode, and as I started, I realized it's the last episode ever under the current name for the show, Untame the Wild Soul. I hit stop on the recording when I realized it to shed some tears and text Natanya, who has helped me produce the show from day one. Her response made me cry even more. Almost 3 years with her, she wrote, but evolution calls. And indeed it does. It's an amazing thing to know the podcast has impacted innumerable lives since May of 2015, including my own on more occasions than I can count. I can't wait to see where she takes us next. If you've been a listener for any period of time, enormous thanks and love to you. Here are some of the comments I received. Thank you. The podcast has been literally life-changing. Love your podcast. You keep me company while I do the dishes. Coming across your podcast was a pivotal moment in untaming my wild soul. Excited for the evolution. Can't wait to see what comes next. Your podcast is a gift to the world. No doubt you were born to do this. Thank you, thank you. Lots of thank yous. Someone else said, it has been my solace and support on so many occasions since the very start. I'm shedding a few tears now. Can't wait to see in the next chapter. Someone said, thank you. Excited to see what comes up next. Major beautiful changes in my life have come as a result from being so inspired by you and the podcast. Couldn't begin to thank you enough. And one more comment. I've learned and implemented so much from the podcast since discovering them in May last year. What you do is appreciated. All of that said, I thought it would be apropos to dedicate today's Sunday sermon to one way of knowing when it's time to move on from something, even when the something is really good, excellent even. And in fact, how sometimes, because something is excellent, is exactly why we have to move on from it. So there's a book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, where he talks about the 4 zones we operate in. I gave away my copy years ago, so I found an online review of it that covers the main points brilliantly at theinvisiblementor.com, and we'll link up to that in the show notes at untameyourself.com/episode-228. So what I'm going to do now is walk through the article and reflect on how the points influenced my decision to move on and evolve from being the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. So the author of this article highlights the 4 zones we operate in. The first one is zone of incompetence. You're bogged down doing tasks that you're not good at, that others can do much better. The solution is to avoid doing them altogether. The zone of competence, you're competent at doing the activities, but others can do them equally well. Delegate and let others do those tasks and free up your time to do the things that make you unique. The zone of excellence, you perform activities extremely well and make a great living, but you're capable of much more. You're quite comfortable and may be tempted to take it easy, but there's only one place that you'll truly thrive, and that's in the next zone, the zone of genius. This is the zone where you liberate your true genius, and it puts you on the ultimate path of living a successful and a satisfied life. And so running the Untame the Wild Soul podcast for me was really about being in the zone of excellence, performing activities extremely well, making a great living, but being capable of much more. And around the fall of 2017, then this is how things happen for me. I don't know how they happen for you, but I start to really feel and sense things in my body, and it begins with a discomfort that eventually becomes more like a restlessness. And that's when I know that something needs to change. And I have a lot of different things going on in my life and in my business. And last year was a really intense year of healing for me after coming out of a long-term relationship that was pretty complicated afterwards when it unfolded. And so I let the uneasiness and the restlessness really simmer for a while because I wanted to be sure that the idea to evolve in the podcast wasn't just reactive because it was coming towards the end of the year. I'd done all this healing. I was feeling just tired, but also amazing. I worked so hard last year on my own healing, my own transformation, and things inevitably, when we grow and when we change, we look around at what's in our lives and we go, does that still fit with who I've become and who I'm becoming? And so much of what I do still absolutely does. So much of what we talk about on the podcast is still going to remain. It's really not going to change. But there were things that were becoming highlighted that I was realizing were much higher priorities for me and that were much bigger values to me than I had been creating space for in the show previously. And so that's part of how I knew that we needed to move on, that we needed to embrace what is more of my genius and what is more aligned with the values of really what I'm here to do, what I'm built to create, what I'm super passionate and super enthusiastic about. And so I decided in early December to change the name of the show. And I was going back and forth on a couple different names. And in tomorrow's episode, I'll talk about this a bit more, how I landed on the name and things like that. But back to Gay Hendricks, he talks also about the 4 hidden barriers that hold us back, because I definitely had some resistance about changing the name of the show. I'm not really someone who cares a ton about what other people think, but I care a ton about people. There's a big difference. So I obviously don't want to disappoint people and let them down, but I also am always willing to let people have their own experiences. And I know that I can't really control who's disappointed or who's let down about this or that, who might be attached to me being who I've been versus who I'm becoming, the show being what it was versus what it's evolving into. And so I knew there was some risk. But as I mentioned earlier, I am not a risk-averse person. So the hidden barriers are sometimes feeling fundamentally flawed. Feeling like something is wrong with you. Perhaps you have a feeling of undeservedness and unworthiness. So you think it's impossible for you to live a successful and fulfilled life. In the past, every time you experienced success, these thoughts infiltrated your mind and somehow you sabotaged yourself. And I read this book, The Big Leap, many years ago, back in, I don't remember if it was 2012 or 2013. So I'm pretty intimate with my own ways of self-sabotage. And so I wasn't really thinking there was anything wrong with me, but I was kind of having the, who am I to do this? Who am I to step into a bigger conversation? And part of that was because of hidden barrier number 2, disloyalty and abandonment. When you refuse to expand and embrace true success because you feel that if you do, you'll have to leave your friends and family behind and you don't want to be alone. And so it wasn't just about leaving friends and family behind, but leaving you all behind, leaving our amazing community. Last year I made the decision to close our private Facebook group, and I had to consider this at that time as well. I knew a lot of people had come to depend and rely on that space, but I also knew it was no longer aligned and no longer in the highest integrity for me to continue to hold that space, a free group with over 5,000 people in it. So the next hidden barrier is believing that more success brings a bigger burden. I have 1,000% been guilty of this one. It's described this way in the article. If you have feelings that somehow you're a burden to others, those feelings will immobilize you and prevent you from rising to your true potential. And so, there were parts of me that imagined that being more aligned with what's true for me, speaking my voice in a bigger way, getting involved in bigger conversations, more meaningful conversations about more pressing issues in our culture and society, and not just like the safe, woo-woo, comfortable things that people have come to know the show for. It felt to me like expanding in that way could feel burdensome to me, not so much that it would be a burden on others, but in a way that I might be taking something away from people, which also is kind of silly. And then the last hidden barrier, I've definitely felt this, is you believe that if you become too successful, you'll make others look bad. It appears that hidden barrier 4 is prevalent among gifted and talented children and often continue to play out in their adult lives. Gifted children are often blamed for taking the spotlight off of other family members. Look back to when you've experienced successful breakthroughs. Were you gripped by fear? Were you afraid of outshining someone from your past? Did you feel that person deserved the success more than you did? Be honest when answering these questions. And so that's a thing too. And in this article, the person mentions the Marianne Williamson quote where she says, "Our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It's our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We're all meant to shine as children do. We're born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. And it's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." And this is something that I've been embracing ever since day one of creating Wild Soul Movement. In fact, the very first challenge I ever ran before Wild Soul Movement was called I Shine, You Shine. And it was based on that quote. And so in feeling into the restlessness and the discomfort, part of what was making me feel that way was back in September and August when we surveyed our audience and our listeners, a lot of people, we asked for constructive feedback, and a lot of people really shared that they were really triggered by me. I had never thought of myself as a polarizing person before. And what I realized was me honoring my truth, having boundaries, using my voice, being courageous, doing things that people work really hard to be able to do, that I have worked really hard to be able to do, but now are like second nature to me, can be really triggering for people. It could be really confronting. It could also be intimidating. When people see someone doing what they want to do or being how they want to be in the world and they're not quite there yet, not everyone goes, "Oh, that's great. I'm so inspired and motivated." Sometimes people go, "Oh, that makes me feel like there's something wrong with me." And they project that stuff onto the source. And so there was a part of me that was like, oh man, like sometimes I already feel like I'm way too much for people. Am I really going to go even deeper? Am I really going to use my voice in an even stronger, bigger way and speak even more about things that might make people uncomfortable? And the answer was, hell yeah, I'm totally going to do that. And so that's kind of what was going on. And so to bring this back to what I said in the beginning, how do you know when it's time to move on from something? You know when you've outgrown it. You know when you're getting that itch or that restlessness or that uneasiness around playing small. I call it hiding in plain sight. I really felt like I had begun to do that because I don't think anyone would have said, oh yeah, Elizabeth D'Alto is a person who's hiding. No way. But I knew I was hiding because I knew there was so much more. I used to, my experience many years ago was that I was sitting on a mountain of potential that I wasn't using. And over the last several years, I've totally been tapping into my potential and really using it, using my gifts, using everything that God gave me in my perspective. And I reached a point where I was like, okay, I've kind of gotten cozy and comfortable using my gifts, and now it's time to stretch. So we are stretching again, y'all, and I want to thank you so much for being here. I also want to wrap up with something that my buddy, Dr. Matt, who'll be back on the show in March, shared. A couple months back, I asked a few of my friends for some character testimonials. We're building a couple new websites in 2018, and I just wanted to update the praise and the swag for the website. And so my friend Dr. Matt, here's what he wrote. Elizabeth is the first person in my mind when I need a radically honest, fiercely loyal, and simultaneously spiritually and emotionally non-attached perspective. She's amazing at telling the highest truth with the greatest love. I'd recommend Elizabeth if you need a fierce ally, a pillar of strength who helps you to see the strength in yourself. For most people, this true strength comes from deep inner work and vulnerability. This is certainly the case with Elizabeth. So this is what we're doing, y'all. Radically honest, fiercely loyal, spiritually and emotionally non-attached perspectives. We are making room for more voices on this show, for more perspectives. And again, I'll talk about this a lot more in tomorrow's episode. But especially towards the end of the year last year, something that really sealed it for me was reading Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness, which if you listen to this show, you've heard me reference it ad nauseum at this point. But one of the things that she shared that really just struck me is how our culture, especially here in the US, is more segregated possibly than ever. People are really spending a lot of times in their bubbles with people who either look like them, think like them, feel like them, do similar things, have similar interests. And if you zoom out on a lot of the problems in our culture right now, it's really because people don't understand each other, they don't respect each other, they don't acknowledge each other. They also just don't know. They don't know what other people are going through. We're a very self-centered culture, and it feels very, very important to me as we evolve this platform to use it to help people see how other people live, what's going on in other people's worlds, to help people expand beyond their bubbles so that we can all live more harmoniously, with more love, with more respect, with more honor, with more reverence. And that just feels so, so, so important to me. So thank you so much for listening to our first 228 episodes as the Untame the Wild Soul podcast. As of tomorrow, episode number 229 will be operating under a new name. And as I already mentioned, the show will be similar in many ways, and in some ways we'll be making some shifts. I'm remembering my last big transition back in 2013 when I started evolving beyond only talking about health and fitness and incorporating more topics of personal growth, psychology, spirituality, self-love, the divine feminine, and embodiment. What happened then is I lost some people who wanted me to stay the same. They only wanted me to hear about fitness. They only wanted to hear about fitness from me. I suspect we might lose some people in this transition too, and that's okay. I always trust that everything has cycles and seasons, and the right people always show up for exactly what they need. One of my greatest values in business and with everything I create is to focus on service. This allows me to ditch my ego and remember to not make it about me, but what wants to come through, what needs to be said that I'm not afraid to say, and how to best be a force for expansion, for love, for good, for healing, transformation, forgiveness, and compassion on the planet during a time of great need, which is right now. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. Thank you as always for your time, your care, your generosity in sharing the show with your friends, family, and coworkers, privately and on social media. And thank you for using it to heal and consider new perspectives. I'll see you in our next episode for the new name reveal.